Hey, Ron.
Hey, Jared.
Enjoying the home office or and the snow this so often here?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you?
Oh, not bad. Legislative session, so it's definitely interesting doing it all remotely. I gotta say, it's but like everything else, once you get it, like for the first couple of weeks, then you're like, okay, I've got this. Know how to log in, and everyone always has like one technical issue eventually, and it makes it definitely keeps things a lot longer, like because like but at the same time it can be done. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Correct. Are you hearing that like sound as well? Like a little ding ding, like a doorbell?
Yes, thanks as people join.
Oh, okay. All right, just making sure.
This is Abby. I had some goofiness when I logged on and I'm seeing myself twice. So I'm going to leave and try again to get on cleanly. Sorry.
All right, good morning, everyone. It's Friday, February 19th, 2021, and this is our Fair Political Practices Commission Digital Transparency Task Force meeting. So thank you all for being here this morning. Before we take the roll and begin, I do want to just announce, I think some folks may have heard that one of our task force members, Professor Wood, has recently been appointed to the Fair Political Practices Commission. So Professor Wood will be hopefully joining us very soon, certainly by our March meeting. So congratulations, Professor Wood.
Thanks. I'm excited. Thanks for thinking of me.
Of course. All right, let's go ahead and get started then. Ms. Lincoln, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Brokaw?
Present.
Ms. Davis? Ms. Kaufman?
She informed me she'll be late, about 10:30.
Gail will actually not be getting on.
Sorry, Josh.
Mr. Kauser?
Present.
Ms. Mulby?
Present.
Mr. Schwab? Ms. Wagner?
Present.
Ms. Wood,
Present.
Chair Matich.
Here. All right, we'll go ahead and proceed to item number 1 then. This is public comment for items not on today's agenda. Hopefully the other task force members saw that we did receive one written comment letter from Brendan Fisher and Austin Graham with the Campaign Legal Center. So if you haven't already, take a look at that comment letter. I think they had some interesting feedback for us. Do we have anyone on the public comment phone lines who wishes to speak before we begin? Hearing none, we'll proceed to item number 2, approval of the January 2021 meeting minutes. Do task force members have any edits, questions, or comments on the meeting minutes? Hearing and seeing none, I'll make a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Maltby. Ms. Linker, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Brokaw,
Aye.
Mr. Heller,
Aye.
Mr. Cowser,
Aye.
Ms. Maltby,
Aye.
Ms. Wagoner,
Aye.
Ms. Wood,
Aye.
Chair Matich.
Aye.
The motion passes.
Thank you. We'll proceed to item number 3. This is the first of our 3 informational presentations today. And item number 3 is the Digital Advertising Alliance and Political Ads Program. And we have Ronald Jacobs, who's the chair of political law practice at Venable LLP, and Michael Signorelli, a partner at Venable as well. Ms. Boyd, I think you were going to give us a little more background on our panelists before they begin.
Yes, thank you. Wanted to introduce Mike Signorelli as a partner in Venable's e-commerce, privacy, and cybersecurity practice group, where he advises clients on compliance with relevant internet, cybersecurity, and marketing regulations. Ron Jacobs is a partner in the firm's political law practice and advises clients such as candidates, independent expenditure groups, and trade associations on campaign finance, lobbying disclosure, and gift rules. Together, they advise companies in the ad tech space about the rules governing digital political advertising. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Ron and Mike. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. I'm Mike Signorelli. Very much appreciate the opportunity to speak with the task force, and it's good to see our friend Jared from Maryland here as well. It's been a while since we've crossed paths, so it's good to see you. I hope all's well. I thought we'd start with providing a little bit background on the DAA to offer some context and how we went from being a commercial advertising program to coming into the political space, to explain the sort of principles behind our approach, and then why we think it's an effective way to provide transparency in the political ad space. So the DAA, jump to the next slide, its origins start in 2007. So we're about a 14-year-old program, and it was stood up by the advertising industry, in particular ad trades, to improve transparency and provide access to control mechanisms so that consumers can better understand how digital advertising works and allow them to control the types of advertising that they see. And it's a program that's backed by credible enforcement by the BBB. It's been recognized by the Obama administration, the FTC, and through the years, many other accolades recognizing the good work that they've done. But I think for our purposes, there's 3 things that are quite relevant to this conversation. The first being the icon. And at the time, it was an innovative privacy protective initiative that brought transparency just in time to individuals on the internet, rather than having to look through privacy policies, but allow it to be actionable. And when you're on a website or an app, you'll see a blue icon in the corner of an ad. That's the DA icon that when you click on it, it brings that individual to notice and the opportunity to control how data is being collected and used. The other feature that's, I think, quite important is that it standardized the user experience. It became very predominant in the market, and more than 1 trillion of these icons are served in ads and on websites and in apps per month globally. So it has a significant footprint and gave consumers the ability to get actionable information in real time to make real-time choices. But importantly, it also created a business language for all stakeholders so that everyone along this very complex ad chain knows that when an icon is present, that advertiser, the DSP, the ad delivery system is comporting its practices with industry best practices, and that it's backed by credible enforcement, and that everyone knows, yes, we do DAA, we have the DAA icon, we're part of the DAA choice tools. It allowed to raise the practice levels and make sure as an ecosystem, we were acting responsibly. And then in 2016, after the federal election, the advertising community saw what was happening with our national elections and came together and said, we can help, we can do better in this space. We have an infrastructure in place where the same companies that are doing commercial advertising are involved in political advertising. We can leverage these assets and deploy it for providing transparency around political advertising and getting information about those campaigns and those candidates in real time, actionable to the individuals who are receiving political campaign messaging. Jump to the next slide. And when I say we created a business language, a common business language, I don't want to underestimate the significance. I know many of you are familiar with this space. You've been in this space for quite some time. And you understand the complexity. But here is may not be simple, but it is a simple diagram of what's happening from campaign, working with an agency, working with a demand side platform, working through exchanges. All of this is happening in milliseconds, and being able to communicate in the same way, the same transparency, the same information. We had to find a way that made it operationally easy for campaigns and for the ad tech companies in the middle and the publishers who are having the display ads showing up on their websites. And that's where the icon to prove to be quite valuable and helpful, because so many of the companies in the space were already using the icon. We changed the color from blue to purple. Blue for interest-based advertising, purple to signify a political campaign. And we set forth, and Ron will go through that in a moment, the elements of what is expected for a political advertiser in this space, actionable from an icon in the ad, that will lead to additional information for any citizen who's experiencing a political campaign. So we go to the next slide.
Great. Thanks, Mike. So I think, a few things that become apparent from the diagram that Mike shared with you is that the regulatory issues in digital political advertising are more complicated than they are in other areas. And I'm probably stating the obvious to the task force, but part of the information, or part of the problem, is that things aren't passed through the chain the whole way. In particular, what we've seen with states where that have looked at regulating the publisher side, which is the newspaper website or wherever it is that the ad applies, that there can really be a problem because they don't really know which ads are on their site at any given moment. And so forcing the publishers to maintain that information or to enforce the political disclosure rules becomes very difficult, if not impossible, to be done. So the question as to where the information resides and who has to maintain that information becomes very important in the digital advertising space in a way that's different than direct mail, TV, radio, any of the more traditional forms of political advertising. And so what the DAA icon does, this is an example that the DAA has put together. If you have a digital political ad, banner ad, it can be embedded in video as well. The icon is up in the corner. And the idea is that instead of having to worry about the disclaimer that any particular jurisdiction might impose, a user can click on that icon and the interstitial will pop up, or hover over it and the interstitial will pop up, that includes the political ad disclosure. And I'll go through the elements that are required there. But as it was designed, it was built for flexibility so that while there are certain common elements that are required for the DAA's self-regulatory program, there's flexibility so that any state law can also fill in and allow the advertiser to include the information there that would be applicable under the state law. And then, as this example shows, if it's a targeted advertisement or that meets the DAA's other requirements, then there's other information below that deals with sort of the other parts of the DAA. So you don't have a whole bunch of icons. It's one icon to get the information that you're looking for. So in that pop-up or the interstitial, the DAA says you have to do the following. You have to include the name of the political advertiser, along with the phone number, address, website, or other reliable contact information for the advertiser, which in some ways goes beyond what a lot of state laws already require to be included on any kind of a disclaimer. And then the next piece is, of course, any other information that's required by applicable state law. So if you're a candidate in California, you have certain requirements. If you're a federal candidate, you would have other information that would be required. This other piece, I think, is a really neat tool that the DAA has included, is that you have to include a link to the government database for the expenditures. So if you're a federal candidate, it's fairly easy to include a direct link to your FEC webpage that shows all of the contributions and expenditures. State candidates, some can direct link into the state disclosure database. Others go to a map that the DAA created that then includes a further link to the state page, because each one is, I'm sure you're well aware, is very different, and some are easy to have an API that allows a direct linkage. Others are harder. Others move at different times, and it's what is searched one time may not work at another time. Any other disclaimers that may be required? And then finally, the name of the advertiser's CEO, member of the executive committee or board of directors, or treasurer. This piece the DAA took from the political file that's typical for a television station when it's airing political advertising. So there's a little more contact information that would go there. And so all of this is required under the self-regulatory principles the DAA has in place. But then also, because it also includes the ability to customize, it can also include all the information that's required under state law. And so I tried to kind of give a sense from what ads in California would look like at a kind of a high level, since you all have some very particular requirements depending on the kind of advertiser that it is. But as you can see, for the candidate, they would simply have the ad paid for by their committee name and could include the committee ID number there. For an independent expenditure committee that has a much more complicated disclaimer regimen, you could include in this pop-up the top 3 funders that are required to be there, and of course the not authorized statement that's also required for an independent expenditure. So that would all pop up in that particular space.
And our goal when we were setting out to provide guidance in this space was to create a standardized framework for delivering relevant information that would work as a complement to what the requirements are in a particular state. We're not suggesting that this program is a substitute for state obligations, state requirements around disclosures, but a common mechanism for providing that information that would be standardized to allow businesses who are in this space to easily communicate the information from one to the next. And then also, just in the commercial space, provide a standard way for the public to find out information. And here we have a couple examples of the icon in the wild. These were actual campaigns in the past year that used the political ads icon, and you could see a presidential campaign for Senator Warren, and then another campaign here on the right that provided information in the ad that would allow for the consumer then to get that drop down that Ron just showed you with the information. Well, I'll note on that one screen where there's the purple and blue icon, we recognize that some campaigns are political and they're also targeted campaigns. And our program is about targeted advertising. That was the initial foundation of the program and its intent. So we want to make sure that both transparency and choices with respect to those different campaigns or those different practices are available. But we've prioritized the political disclosure over the commercial disclosure, and having the purple icon in the ad and having that come first with the relevant information about a campaign, and followed with, this is also a targeted ad, and you may be able to exercise choices by going to the DAA choice programs, which I should have noted that the DAA offers mechanisms that allow consumers to opt out of targeted campaigns as well. Go to the next slide.
Mike, one thing to point out on both of these ads is that there's some duplication because the federal law does not recognize the use of an icon. It still has to say paid for by Warren for president on the ad. Same with New Mexico, but it certainly could be a situation where, particularly for smaller ads, that if the state law, and I think you'll hear from Jared, in Maryland that if the state law recognizes the icon, then you can simplify the ad and not have to have duplication there, although you certainly can if you want to. It's a matter of trying to find ways, particularly as some of the ads get smaller and smaller, to simplify for folks.
And that's an important point to emphasize, that the icon leading to interstitial information actually makes more information available to an individual than what is on the face of the ad itself. And the icon, because of a decade plus of experience with digital media, works across many different platforms and size of ads. It works in web, mobile, video, and the industry is quite experienced in delivering this icon across different formats, providing access to additional information. We want to show you a little bit on the back end of what this looks like from the business view. Here's one of the participants in the program. They shared with us what their API looks like, where they're onboarding political campaigns. Don't expect you to read through all of this, but the highlights is when you're doing a self-serve campaign, meaning the campaign's coming to a platform and saying, I want to reach audiences with my messages, they can go through an API like this and designate a campaign as being political. And you could see in some of the highlighted boxes, the purple icon political ads, they would check a box saying, yes, this is a political campaign. And then therefore, as that campaign's being delivered, it would include the political ads icon. And you can see in that last box, that purple call out, were the information that we require by our program and whatever else might be required by state law to include and populate, so that can be part of the interstitial. So you can see again how we're creating that language among stakeholders to help facilitate these disclosures. And then one more little bit on the substance, and I think we've covered this throughout, but the idea is that this icon does work across many different formats and many different sizes, from large skyscraper billboard ads to even the smallest ads in mobile. On your device, you'll see that the icon shows up in your mobile apps. It's often in settings and in the app itself or freestanding. And so it works across many different channels, sizes, and easily delivers the content and information to whoever's receiving an ad on their device.
And so, just in terms of ways to think about the DAA icon and how it can be part of a state enforcement or a state regulatory framework, it can be everything from changing the regulations or the statute to say, for small ads or for certain kind of ads, you can use the icon in place of the printed disclaimer, specifying particular content in the interstitial, even going so far as to referencing, the existing frameworks that are out there, like the DAA icon, so that it's clear that everyone uses the same icon. Part of what we think is valuable from the icon itself standpoint is that it is the same icon that's with a color difference. It's an icon that people have become accustomed to in their digital advertising. And so as they see that, they know to click on it and get this information. And I think it's also, when you spend time looking in the FPPC regs and the font size and color and bold, no caps, justified the formatting, you can simplify all of that and make it easier to deal with, because the interstitial has the capabilities to put those things in there, and also becomes less important because it's all in the size of the interstitial as opposed to scaling up and down depending on the size of the ad. And we think there's some real benefit there. And again, is more jurisdictions adopt the icon or allow the use of an icon, it becomes more apparent. And so it allows for more people to simplify their information gathering and understanding what's what. And I think the final point is that when we talk to clients in the ad tech space, the political ad tech space, it's really hard sometimes for them to represent clients in multiple jurisdictions because the rules are different everywhere. How do they know that they're complying with a rule in California versus Washington State versus New York? And so the more consistency that's there, the easier it is for those companies to provide good quality ad compliance for their clients. In terms of an advertising agency that may do political ads in multiple states, they know how to handle it if there's a common standard there. Even if the particulars differ, the implementation can be the same, and that makes things much easier and more effective for candidates and others to communicate. So that brings us to the end of our presentation, and we're happy to take any questions you might have.
Great. Thank you, guys. That was a fantastic presentation. Let me ask first, do other task force members have any, I know I have some questions, but first, does anybody else have any questions or comments for our panelists? Ms. Wagner?
Yeah, I do. I'm really excited about this presentation. Thank you very much. I thought you covered a lot of really detailed information clearly and thoroughly. And so I'm thrilled to see you talk about the flexibility along with the consistency, not only for the people who are putting in the information and for the voters, but also for the people that are then pulling it out on the other side. I'm curious, you talked a little bit about testing and what you have found has worked. Is that something that's been done concretely so that you have research showing across Google and Facebook and YouTube and Twitch and in specific apps that different things have worked? Can you say a little bit more about how you've come to these conclusions?
Yeah, certainly. And much of it has just to do with experience and time and testing that the DA has done. The testing is more on the commercial side and seeing that the icon has appeared across formats and, just visually seeing it in across many devices. That's how we know it works. And we have technical specifications for the delivery of the political ads icon, so that we talk about dimension, size, and delivery and video in different formats and different sizes. So from that perspective, on the delivery, we've been working for more than a decade with companies and getting reporting about volume of the icon. That's how we know about the delivery. But the DA itself also does testing about consumer understanding. Do they recognize the icon over time? And the numbers are well over 60% that consumers are coming to know and understand the icon, knowing that it is a means to access information. I want to make the point when you were saying those larger platforms, we worked with many of them. Many of them are participants in the DAA, and our requirements map against their disclosures. But they've actually gone above and beyond even what the baseline is, and offer much more information and access. And what we're creating is a standard approach for the broader market who deliver political campaigns, but don't have the same platform and the ability to surface the other tools. So in a way, we're trying to open the market to allow for political advertising by other players in the market who aren't just based where they're sitting, be able to do the same or as much as the companies that you mentioned, like Google and Facebook and Twitter and others.
Great. And so kind of on a follow on to that, I love that you're sharing not only the requirements for the ad, but also ideas about how they could do the back end. So how they do the input, and then also the API, so that if we're interested in either having a repository that can pull from these systems or helping people use tools to be able to search in addition to just clicking on the ad, that's really interesting and really helpful. I think that's one of the big questions I've been wondering about is how we're going to take all of these new standards and have them be something that the public and researchers can use. I do have a question though, because a lot of what you've talked about is exclusively digital. And I'm curious, I think a larger like full brand identity package that's multi-channel, where it's also thinking about podcasts, which are not as visual, although you do click on your phone to look at it, or radio or even TV, because those haven't gone away. And so have you also talked about using the same symbology in other situations, even in print, for example?
Yeah, we are, and it's very timely. We actually have a working group right now looking at how to provide transparency, like in the digital world on web and mobile, in connected devices. And so we have a group together right now that's thinking through, can we do an audio prompt? Can we use QR codes? So are there ways to extend the same level of transparency and access to information on many other devices? It's complicated, but we are working through that now, and we're thinking about your refrigerator to your smart speaker to everything else, because all of this is connected and the data is being used across these devices. So the short answer is yes. But one thing I'd like to come back to one of your points about you found interesting that the notice links to databases and other information. One of the things that we heard when we were talking with businesses and the companies in this space, that a challenge they have, because everything's happening so quickly, the transactions are in milliseconds, is keeping up with dynamic links. And that was a challenge for them, that they might be running a campaign and they're doing this nationally, but from California to Idaho to New York, being able to real time change the link to a specific database or report was too complicated and wouldn't allow them to do this efficiently. So what we did is we created links that went somewhere. We have a political ads page, which you go from the icon to the notice to a political ad page, and you click on the state, and that takes you to a reporting database. And that helped make it easier to operationalize the requirements so that it's somewhat more static. They know it's a campaign in California. Here's the link for California, rather than here's an updated link every time someone asks for something else. And so that's something we try to do, is make it a little bit more consistent for them.
Thank you.
Great. Do other task force members have questions for our panelists? Professor Kauser.
Yeah, thanks very much. This was really helpful to go through the full range and the inside and the outside aspects of this. I have two questions. So one is just technical. So for a streaming platform, if we're moving towards the era where your TV is now your computer, is now a computer, if I'm watching anything streaming on a television that doesn't have a touch screen, right, or it doesn't have I don't have a mouse icon. Is there any technological solution here for click-through on that? Is there any approach that is being thought of? And then the second one is sort of just a human behavior question. I don't know if I missed this, but just what is the click-through rate? And if you have any sense of the true click-through rate for political versus other ads, or different aspects, or just the overall rate?
Yeah, so on the first one, I mean, my disclaimer is I'm a lawyer in my basement in Arlington, Virginia. So I don't know if you want me to help you figure out the tech issues. Those are issues that we bring in specialists for to help us actually figure out what our policy translates into the streaming world. So what we're working on now is figuring out what the policy requirements are for streaming services, to your TV, to your smart device, whatever it may be, your speaker, and how to do that. And some of the ideas that we have that come up, in our group for OTT right now, over the top cable and things like that, is how do we activate this transparency, to your point, where you can't go to your TV because it's not touchscreen and hit the icon. And there are different things that we're talking to industry and the manufacturers themselves to see what's workable. And it could be something in the settings. It could be a QR code. We even have streaming services are saying that they could do a prompt during podcasts, things like that we're thinking through. We're not there yet to actually share what that could look like, but we're thinking through how to do this and how to apply it. And then, the engineers will help us figure out how to deploy that beyond that. I mean, our program started with, how do you provide transparency on the predominant platforms, which are web and mobile? And that's what we've been working on, but realizing that the market changes. And that's something the DAA does, is we're constantly thinking. When the program started in 2007, it was web. 2013, we moved to mobile. 2015, we started addressing cross-device. So activity on your browser, how does it impact your mobile device? So it continues to innovate with industry practices. And you're focused on the right question. Innovation is now to streaming. And so we're trying to figure out how to translate our program there.
Thank you.
Sure.
Click-through rates.
The click-through rates, one of the things, and it's probably going to be an unsatisfying answer, is that this started as a privacy program to provide transparency and control, which means the DAA did not make the icon smart. We don't have a tag in the icon. So when it's clicked, we don't know. Whoever's serving it knows, because we felt that politically tracking online for a privacy program sort of defeated the purpose of providing transparency and control about tracking online. So we don't get click-through rates, but what we can report to, or at least what we know from action from the icon, is that when someone clicks the icon, they get a notice, they can click through to our choice pages. And we have some, over the life of the program, 60 million click-throughs, tens of millions of click-throughs to our choice pages. And then from there, there's information about the program and your choices, and then action taken on the page. So I can tell you that we do know that it works. People interact with it. They click on links. They come to the DAA properties. and make choices. We also have surveys that show us that consumers recognize the icon. And when they see it and they say, yes, I understand that's ad choices or political ads, and we can make choices based on that link.
Okay, thanks. And so the denominator would then be 12 trillion a year or so worldwide?
No, the delivery of the icon is much higher. That's more the click through from an icon to our page. Now, some people click an icon, will read it and say, okay, so this is a Coca-Cola ad, or this is a campaign for this, this candidate, and take no further action. They got the information they want. What I was reporting is they saw the notice and then they took action and went somewhere else. So that's what the tens of millions are, is that someone went somewhere to one of the DA properties. The icon on the commercial side, we know just from reporting from the companies, and they won't give us specifics because it's competitive, what the campaigns are and what they're running, is that, we're well over $1 trillion a year with the delivery of the icon worldwide in ads and on websites. So it's probably the most significant footprint on the internet when you think about the number of impressions and websites and apps that carry the icon.
Okay, thanks very much.
Yep.
All right, do other task force members have questions? Professor Wood?
Thanks for this presentation. I think DAA is kind of interesting as a private regulatory mechanism, and so Jennifer and Thad asked a bunch of the same questions that I had, but I guess I'll move and just ask about kind of the enforcement side and the line drawing side. So if I want to run an ad that should be regulated as a political ad, but I go to DAA and don't fill in that information and don't say it's political, what does DAA do about that? How do they find out? And then do they kick me out of the DAA? Like, what happens,
Yeah, no, sure. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Sorry, I just had one second question, and then I'll, in the form that I fill out, do I report to the DAA what the targeting criteria were that I used? And then I guess thirdly, and I think I know the answer to this, but can this be blocked by a browser extension on the user end?
All right, so I'm just jotting down so I
Sorry, maybe I should have gone one at a time.
No, it's fine. I think I got it all. We're talking about enforcement, the provision of information, the targeting criteria, and the impact of ad blocking or browser extensions.
Yeah,
just
can it be blocked generally?
Yeah. So on the enforcement side, we do have enforcement mechanisms. The predominant one is the Better Business Bureau, who actively monitors campaigns in the marketplace through a technology that sweeps the internet for campaigns and brings investigations and publicly reports on them. On the commercial side, the DAA side, for the ad choices program, the BBB in the 10-year history has brought more than 120 plus cases, public cases, plus other cases that didn't lead to a finding of violation of our code. And in those cases, in all the cases, the company, when notified, comes into compliance. So it's a corrective program. You are not providing transparency. You do not have the icon. You're not providing choice. This is what you needed to come into compliance. And then we publicly report on who the company is. If a company does not come into compliance, refuses to work with the BBB, it gets reported to the appropriate regulatory body, most often the FTC, and most often meaning it's happened once or twice in the 10-year history. And when it was reported and made public that it was reported to the FTC, the company came into compliance within a week. So it has a stick to it. Public shaming is pretty powerful. And when one company is found not to be in compliance, what happens is their market forces. You hear from your business partners because nobody wants to be on that list. On the political side, BBB uses the same tools, the same monitoring services, and issues public reports about non-compliance and what's happening in the marketplace. So that's out there and available. It's not a kick you out of the program or civil penalties, because civil penalties is we're a private organization, but the kicking out of the program, the DAA is not a membership program, so it's not applicable to only to DAA members. the DA applies to the activity. So if you're engaged in political advertising regulated by the DAA, or you're engaged in interest-based advertising, whether you heard of the DAA or not, if you're not following our rules, you will hear from the BBB. So that means that there are enforcement actions to companies that have formally participated in the DAA, but have a misstep. And those that don't formally participate are also subject to enforcement actions. So that's the corrective measure. And it's been recognized by the Federal Trade Commission as a program with teeth and great accolades for its enforcement. On the form and the criteria, one thing to note is the DAA is the regulatory body. We issue the rules and do the enforcement. We don't manage the campaigns for any particular candidate or company. That's them working with their partners. So we don't do intake as to candidate X running for seat Y. They don't come to us to run a campaign. They will go to an agency, political agency. They'll work with ad tech to deliver campaigns. So that's where they would report whatever they're trying to, whatever the criteria for targeting. So we don't have insight to that. That slide that we had in our presentation, in those schematics, which I think we've provided, you'll have access and you can see it. That's where the targeting criteria is listed, and what they're trying to do a regional targeting campaign. So we don't have insight into the actual campaign targeting. What we do is have rules about targeted campaigns and how you do that in a privacy friendly way. And if you're not doing so, then the BBB comes and knocks on your door. The final one is blocking these campaigns through extensions. If there's an ad blocker or an extension that rips out the scripts on a web page that doesn't allow advertising, yes, the icon won't appear, but the ad won't appear either. And that's something that the DA doesn't believe is the right result. That should happen for many reasons. It denies access to important information, but also that revenue from the ad is used to support that website, that publisher, and that app in providing other products and services. And so it really falls on its face in two ways: denying individuals access to information, and then also undermining the internet model, and not allowing for access to free information and services in the digital space.
So just one follow-up on the Better Business Bureau. That was really surprising to me that it's the Better Business Bureau that kind of monitors and sweeps and reports out in the political context. How often does it actually happen with a campaign that the Better Business Bureau kind of reports that they're not complying with this transparency stuff?
So I believe they've issued 2 reports. Now it's a newer program. We issued our guidance in 2018, and it was then effective and running in 2019. So the first real cycle was 2020, and they've issued a couple of reports, more on sort of trends in the market. Here are some examples of how the market is adjusting to this, and they haven't yet, I think, identified specific campaigns and worked through it. One of the things that I think you'll understand is that unlike a commercial campaign by Procter & Gamble, Tide is always there, and working with them. Campaigns come and go rather quickly, and so what we're doing is providing a transparency report on campaigns and whether or not they're meeting transparency, and that's something we will share with a regulator, but also we're going to provide that to think tanks who are monitoring elections and how transparency is being delivered during election cycles, so that they can use that in their reporting to inform their own thinkings.
Thanks.
All right, do other folks have questions before I start jumping in here? All right, so again, I think conceptually, this is very interesting to me. It does seem like, particularly with digital media, this might be a more efficient way of getting the information across to voters, and frankly, even more information maybe than current disclaimers may require. But I want to circle back to where I think Professor Kauser correctly started, which is the click-through rate. And my understanding is that you've made a choice not to track that. So does that mean you have the capability to do it, but you haven't flipped the switch and done that type of tracking at this point?
I think in the realm of theoretical, yes. I mean, we could require for political campaigns to insert a tag so that we can get this level of reporting. We just didn't explore that. Again, as a creature of a policy reform and working with the US Congress and the Federal Trade Commission, that was not something they wanted to see us do back in 2007 through 15. So, you know, what we've issued is a framework and a standardization and really an opening for a conversation with regulators, that we think this is a way that can work. We hope that it will help drive some innovative thinking and we could do some partnership, which is my way of saying we would be very happy to have a conversation with you to see how we can make this a more impactful program in California and across the United States.
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful to drill down on that type of data a little bit further, at least from my perspective as a regulator. I mean, what I wouldn't want to do is, for example, I know the top 3 contributors, some people feel very strongly that that's important information the voters should see. That's why we require it on the face of the disclaimers. And the assumption is if they don't see anything else, this is the most important information. It's great that in theory we could embed that and a lot of other information in, you know, the interstitial pop-up that you're talking about. But if nobody ever clicks it, they're actually in effect getting less information than they would have under the current rules, and we don't want to go there. So from my standpoint, I really, if there's any way we can get some data on the click-through rates, that'd be very helpful, at least in terms of my thinking on whether we can, you know, support this or not.
Sure. I think there's just 2 reflections on that. One, you know, I think the program's a complement and provides additional information. In no way needs to be a substitute of what's on the face of the ad. If you want to continue to require certain disclaimers in the ad, that seem wholly appropriate. And this is additional information. The other part to the political program is that, you know, if it's adopted, recognized, that will help reinforce the efficacy of the icon and the approach, and would allow for better education in California about when you see this icon, this is what it means. It would be sort of a push and pull effect if we were able to partner, or if it was recognized, to have it be something that is maybe endorsed, not endorsed, but sort of, you know, if it's a requirement in California, I think people would come to recognize it more readily as to what it is and what it does. So I think there's a ability to partnership on education around the icon.
And I think to follow up on Mike's point there, where we find it to be really effective as a substitute is particularly on the smaller ads, where, you know, sticking the top 3 donors on a, you know, small little pop-up is really hard to say that someone even sees it there, in that it complements it on the bigger ads where you can have both without, losing that effect. And that it, you know, I think particularly on the, you know, as we think about mobile devices and other smaller screens, that's where that really comes into play to help give people more information where it just doesn't show up clearly.
Right. No, I appreciate that. So let me take a step back now so I totally understand this. Your organization has come up with this concept. You offer this icon. But as I understood from your presentation, you don't have to actually be a DAA member to use the icon. Is that correct? Anybody who's doing a political advertisement could use the icon?
That's correct. I mean, there's a certification or licensing requirement. So you come to DAA to get the icon, and then it's used by businesses in this space to deliver the icon in ads. So it's not just grab and go, so to speak, but there's some level of engagement with DAA.
Okay. And I think you covered this in your presentation. I apologize if I just didn't catch it, but who is responsible for getting the certification to use the icon then? Is it the campaigns that would be doing that? Is it the advertising platform? Like who mechanically is the one getting the icon and applying it?
So either or all can come to get the icon. The ultimate obligation under our program is on the political advertiser to sort of self-attest that it's a political campaign. I showed you the API. The campaign would come to that ad tech entity and say it's a political campaign. And we've made it available to the ad tech platform so they can make it available to campaigns to help facilitate the ease for delivering the icon. But the ultimate obligation's on the political advertiser because they're in the best position to identify their campaign as being political.
All right. Has DAA, trademarked this icon? Let's just say, and part of the reason I'm asking this question is, suppose California likes the idea of symbology. We want to incorporate that in, but maybe we want to use a little bear icon or something different, right? So what happens? Have you trademarked that? I mean, can you talk about that?
Sure. No, the icons, and there are 3 different colored icons. We have the blue one for ad choices, a green one for helping companies comply with the new California privacy law, and then the purple one for political ads. That is intellectual property of the DAA. The political icon is available for free. It's not a revenue model for DAA, but it is trademark. And if it's an icon that California would like to use, we would certainly work out the arrangement so that it be made available.
I think, to that point, one of the benefits of standardization is that it becomes recognizable, whether it's particularly if it's adopted at the federal level. So the bear is as great as it might be in California may not be as recognizable to people that, oh, it's a political bear, to click on that.
Right. No, that's a good point. What's the verification process like that you use when somebody applies for one of these icons? Do you actually get some type of certification from the regulatory agency in the state that they've filed the correct paperwork and that they're in compliance?
So the short answer is no, because what the icon is a mechanism for transparency. And it's tied to what our requirements are. So when you click on the icon, it must include the elements that Ron went through about who the advertiser is, contact information, links to the appropriate government databases. There isn't yet full broad scale adoption from local regulators for our icon. Where we then check is when the BBB is doing its inquiries and its monitoring. If it finds that somebody is doing a political campaign and there's no icon, that gets flagged. Or if they have the icon but none of the information in it and it's being used for other purposes, then we would step in. And the reason why we have licensing is if someone's misappropriating our icon, we want to be able to remove it. And we haven't had an instance where someone's using an icon for some other purpose, that driving traffic for some kind of commercial enterprise. But that's an example. If somebody was using our political icon for their own commercial gain, we wouldn't allow that. That's not allowed by our licensing, and so we would step in and withdraw that from their ability to use it.
All right, that's helpful. Also, I know you mentioned just in terms of defining what political ads are for purposes of your symbology. I know you mentioned IE campaigns. I think the typical candidate campaigns that everyone would think about. What about issue ads? Do you consider those to be political ads?
So for purposes of the self-regulatory program, we don't. We decided to start small and go from there. So what we've said is any federal candidate and then any statewide candidate is required in any independent expenditure that does express advocacy for a candidate is required under the self-regulatory program to comply. If you said, you know what, we want the icon in our world, you could easily define it to include electioneering communications or any other sort of ad that you wanted to. But for now, DAA wanted to focus on figuring out a universe that it could apply to clearly, rather than trying to parse through what's an issue ad and what's not, and try to lay the marker down to start with.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Because you're right, it does get more complicated when you try to differentiate issue ads from other types of political ads. But it doesn't, so just on that last point though, so you talked about statewide and federal, but so local and, for example, here in California, then state legislative races, which are not statewide, obviously they're based on districts, those would not be subject to this disclaimer.
Not under the DAA's rule right now, no. What again, this was part of the, how can we get this out to sort of the people most likely to adopt it first? As Mike said, this was the first election that was really in play. And so If you down the road, we want to try and figure out what it looks like. But certainly if the state said, hey, we recognize an icon as a way to do this, it could apply to every race, up and down the ballot.
And there's no limitation in the sense that if a candidate is not on a statewide election campaign, they would be able to use it if they came to us and asked for it. We just didn't mandate that at the get-go, as Ron was saying, just trying to make it available and more likely to be used to start with.
So last question I had, how many jurisdictions are currently using this or requiring it or offering it as an option for folks?
Maryland,
sorry, go ahead, Ron.
So Maryland, certainly. I think that's why you have Jared here to fill you in on that one. We've been in discussions with Washington State as well. And I'm trying to think if there are any other ones off the top of my head. I don't think there are yet. I'm hopeful that after this election cycle where we see a little bit more of it used, that more states are interested in adopting this. I think one of the things that we've seen was that in that same time window, the 2016 to 2020, as digital advertising really became a hot topic, a lot of states, California and others, passed legislation to try and deal with political ads. And so that was where the DAA started to say, well, there's something here. We need to maybe try and come up with a standardization. And so we're hopeful that now that a cycle's gone through, as other states start to come up with ideas, that it does gain more traction.
Yeah, and we've made it available throughout the country. So any jurisdiction, a company campaign can use it. And a campaign meaning the ad tech vendors in the mix of it. So it's not limited to particular states. And I guess to best represent the program, it's a first attempt of a standardized way to provide easy access to information in digital medium. We're not suggesting that as is, it will solve every issue you're facing, but we think it could be an important part of how you address political advertising in the state. We fully expect that there will need to be additions and changes to the disclosures, but it's a complement and a place to start. And so it's in that sort of sense, that perspective, that we've come here to have a conversation.
Great. Thank you. And again, I think it's a very interesting idea. A lot of good information here. Certainly a lot to think about. So if we don't have any further questions for these panelists, I think this is actually a good time to segue to Mr. Damarinus from
Katie
Maryland.
has her hand up.
Oh, sorry, Katie, I didn't see it.
Sorry, it's okay. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. That was very interesting. I have two questions or clarification points. So, and apologies if I couldn't tell. Is your icon the one that says political ad, or is it an image? I couldn't tell. I'm sorry.
Or it depends on the size of the ad. It's the purple icon here. I'll bring it back up.
I couldn't see that in the slide. By the time it got to my screen, it was too tiny for me to see. So,
yeah. So it's
it's the icon plus wording.
So if you can see on the Elizabeth Warren ad, it says both political ad and has the icon because that's a fairly large ad. The
I can't see the icon. That's my problem. It's so small on my screen.
It's up in the.
I see political ad, but that's it.
Just to the right of it is a purple triangle.
Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, I mean, I can see it on the green one, the Damon.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's the triangle. Okay. Just one. This is just sort of my musing aloud. For me, I've seen this before, but I thought it was purely identification that it's a political as opposed to commercial ad. I had no idea that there would be disclosures behind it. So I didn't know whether you had given any thought to adding political disclosure or something like that, so it's more clear what it was. I thought it was more a tag in the conversation, what's political ad versus commercial. So that's one just comment, and I know you run out of space, so that's an issue.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is the real estate in the ad and how much you could fit, but I think something like that makes sense. And whatever the right sort of nomenclature for going with the icon, whether it's political disclosure or some formulation, that is a good idea and something that we could work with and work with you on, to whatever it is to sort of signal that there's more information there, which also goes to the point that whatever is done here is going to need an in-state education campaign to help educate the citizen as to what is available to them.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's helpful. And then the second one was to follow on the idea, and I understand from if you're trying to do this at a national level, trying to have some consistency. The flip side, my understanding was that you can click and then you keep on clicking until you get to sort of the rules that might apply to your jurisdiction. Is that how it is? Or if you're just because the more clicks, if that's the case, the more clicks you have to do, you're going to lose people. We want people one click to be able to see the answer, and I don't know whether that's possible given every jurisdiction has different rules.
Yeah, so part of the form that gets filled out to populate that interstitial includes whatever the state would require. So you would in California, for example, for an independent expenditure ad, the top 3 donors would be right there in the interstitial. You wouldn't have to click through any further. The click through part was more to get to the database if you wanted to really get home to how, to the independent expenditure committee to look at all of their contributions and expenditures. That requires a click through as opposed to obviously it'd be hard to put the whole Secretary of State's database of contributions right there.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Ogden. Any further questions for these panelists from our task force? Going once, going twice. All right, thank you, gentlemen, appreciate it. At this point, we turn to Jared Damarinus. He's the Director of Candidacy and Campaign Finance Division of the Maryland State Board of Elections. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. I guess I had some remarks here, but I guess I'll make it easier and I can kind of answer some of the questions that you had as an enforcement agency in this space. I think 2016 was a watershed moment in electoral politics here. It really showed the impact that online advertisements can have on the entire electorate right now, and also not only its advantages, but how it could be used with untoward purposes, and how its impact for it on the electorate. As a regulator, my goal was always to be flexible with the understanding of making sure that our overarching principle of disclosure is maintained in this field here. Campaigns love this entire area here because 1, it is cheap, 2, it is very effective, and 3, they can target exactly who they want to speak to. So there is no information that doesn't go exactly to where they want to go. So with all this here, Maryland was always trying to understand how we can change the system, to allow this while still maintaining the disclosure elements. As we were going through all the scenarios here, I think at one point, as Mike and Ron were saying, that this is a complex or complicated field here. It is and it isn't. In a sense, it's a tunnel. You have campaigns at one end of the tunnel, and they're trying to communicate with voters at the other end of the tunnel. As a regulator, I care about this start here point and this end point. How it goes up and down through this tunnel here, and the interchanges and the exchanges and all the points in between there are not really my concern, because those are contractual relationships. So in a sense, we kind of boiled it down to what the campaigns know, trying to get into the tunnel, and the end product that the voters see. And when we were going through this, we were looking at the voters and making sure that they get information at their fingertips and that they don't have to necessarily leave to go and find it somewhere else. Initially, we had the idea was to make sure that when these small banner ads, when they first came out, that there was click-throughs, because if we required disclaimers on all the ads, it would be virtually impossible to see. Or the ads themselves would the disclaimers would chew up the space. So, you can have a banner ad and have little tiny font across the board there, but that doesn't anybody any good. So we were trying to make sure that when a person sees this ad or has the impression of the ad, that they can get as much information from it as quickly as possible without necessarily trying to go to the state board or a different site. With this, that's why we allowed either the click through or some sort of scroll over the ad where the window would pop up so that the information was available to the voter right then and there to make the informed choice. Additionally, we had passed the Online Electioneering Transparency Act in response to the 2016 ad here to create a database for this, a repository for all this information on certain platforms here. And I have a quick little video here that I would like to show you. I think this kind of explains it for us here. And does everyone see it? Okay.
Yes.
Hey, Jared, if there's sound, you should share it from your Zoom because we're not getting any sound.
Oh, there's no sound?
No, you got to share it from, you guys remind me, it's like share from computer or something. Maybe up under your share screen command.
All right.
Sorry, I ran into this when I was teaching. It's a pain.
Okay, so stop. Okay. Share screen. Okay, so is it under? Audio settings.
All right, we're going to try, our IT department here is going to try and do it for us. So
yes, I'm sorry, yeah. Okay. I'll stop sharing the screen then. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks.
Transparency, accountability, and political ads. Maryland House Bill 981 in a nutshell. Political ads. We see them everywhere while surfing the internet or scanning social media. You might pay attention to them, you might not. The purpose of these ads, in a nutshell, they're there to influence your vote. But what do you know about these ads and who is funding them? Maryland House Bill 981, also known as the Online Electioneering Transparency and Accountability Act, makes it easy for you to find out. This bill, which took effect on July 1st, 2018, requires that public-facing websites and ad networks create and maintain a database that provides background information about any political ad they display. If you've seen House Bill 981, it might look a bit complicated, but it really isn't. Got a few minutes? Here's an overview example of how it works. Let's say a campaign creates a political ad that they want to place on various websites. The campaign may use a few methods to do this. For example, they can purchase ad space on a specific website. They could also approach an ad network. Ad networks place ads across multiple public-facing websites to make sure plenty of people will see this ad. So when a campaign purchases ad space from a website or ad network, the campaign must answer one important question from the website. Is this a political ad? If the campaign isn't asked that important question by the website, then the campaign must contact the state board to let them know that the website isn't in compliance with Maryland law. If the answer is yes, a few key things must take place. 1. The ad space can only be purchased using U.S. currency. And then, 2. The website or ad network will put information about the political ad into a publicly accessible database updated regularly within 48 hours. So what information about the ad goes into the database? This database will show the potential voter or viewer information such as who paid for the ad, how much did they pay for it, and when was the ad purchased. Once this information is placed in the database, the ad network or website must place a link to the database on its web page or in the ad. Viewers can see the ad, click on the link, and review information about the ad. The website where the ad is placed will host the database so that the viewer can easily access the information without leaving the website. If there are any issues with compliance by campaigns, ad networks, or websites, the State Board of Elections is there to enforce and issue civil citations. So House Bill 981? It makes it easy for you to stay alert and, most importantly, stay informed about the online messages created to influence your vote. Want to know more about the Online Electioneering, Transparency, and Accountability Act? You can find out more detailed information here at mgaleg.maryland.gov, and you can also review the Code of Maryland Regulations, also known as COMAR.
Thank you for that. So yes, I mean, that made it a nice, simple point of it. We tried to make it as easy as possible for individuals to have one-stop shopping, and that's the key to this here. And I think that we've had some debate over this, which was having the state board host it, but then once again, the individual would leave whatever site that they were on in order to go to a different one. And we felt as though that was not going to happen with people. The whole point of these ads is not, it's more repetitive, because that's why they're impressions rather than actual views. It's just over and over, it's just the eyeballs scrolling over it. So by having this information readily available to them at that fingertips there in the same location would be the best avenue here. Additionally, we didn't have enough resources to handle creating of the database, which we felt, the technologically that, these are tech companies and have the ability to store this information. At the end here, like I said, we tried to make it so it was easy for with the concept here. By starting the process with a simple question, which is a political ad, by forcing the platforms to answer to ask that one question here, it puts the onus then on the campaign to say yes. And then once that answer is yes, then no matter where it goes through the entire tunnel, it always has that flag of being a political ad. Our political ads, to answer your question, not just include candidates, but independent expenditures, electioneering communications. So all those would be considered political in the state of Maryland, requiring disclosure. So as they would all have to be a part of that. And this helps with enforcement, because if the public facing or if the ad network doesn't ask that question, then we can go after them for violations of that, because it's just a simple question. If the campaigns say no, when they know that they are supposed to disclose this, then that puts them already trying to deceive and possibly create different penalties for the campaign at that point as well. So it creates a lot of good enforcement mechanisms right there. And then at the end product here for the voters will get as much information as possible here. This is at the end here. Digital ads are here to stay. It is something that I believe that campaigns, and as we move through this here, there's going to be basically TV, radio, and direct mail you're going to see the numbers be less and less, and it's going to go into digital, because digital is far more effective in putting their messages out. Additionally here, the idea, one of the concepts too of making sure that the database exists and is to create more speech elements here. Whereas before you would be able to see ads against campaigns or for or against, say, a candidate. And then the other candidate would have the ability to respond because of the broad nature of the distribution of the ad, whether it's, a TV ad, a radio, even direct mail at one point there, they would have the ability to see and move forward with it. What you don't really see is when you have a really targeted campaigns, the opposing side doesn't really know what is being said and doesn't have the ability to respond. By creating the database there, that these campaigns then can go on these platforms here that they want to touch and to see what ads are being said, and allow them then to either respond directly back to those same voters in a method so that it creates a good political discourse here and helps voters make choices. Because you could have a scenario where it's just basically voters receiving information only from one side because of the targeted nature of digital ads. Along the lines there, there are other issues that we're addressing in this situation, and that's bots, and the use of bots to help promote ads here, as well as digital astroturfing here with the use of handles to create some sort of groundswell behind you. These are areas that are very tricky, and we kind of, once again, look at it maybe in a simplistic way here, but at the end, it's kind of, once again, the campaign is employing or the root cause behind these activities here, in which we can regulate, and they know what they're doing. So once we started to say, if you use a bot or if you use other handles to disseminate your message, you have to disclose this activity on campaign finance reports, as well as in the ad or in the bot itself now. So we have started this. Basically, the first election which we had, this was under, was the 2018 election. The law that was in question did create some ruffles among some of the platforms. Google has pulled out of Maryland and did not want to take any political ads in the state of Maryland. And the press also sued us, but we've reached a conclusion that if it's a press entity platform, they do not have to create the database on that front there, but all the other platforms do. Additionally, we made it a very low threshold. If you look at HR 1 or at some of the federal legislation out there, it talks about 50 million hits and all this. That's great. In California, that also might work because of your population here, but we were looking at it going, if you really wanted to impact a state delegate or a state Senate race, you're not going to necessarily advertise on some of the national papers or national sites. You're going to target very specific sites that are in your neighborhood, that this blog or this posting area here, and they're not going to have that huge viewership in order to do this. But that's why we made ours a very low threshold, because we wanted to know that that's where the impact will be felt for the races that we're basically looking at, which are state and local races. I think that's one of the big difference here is federally, they look at huge numbers and the impact, because that's where that's their share. Whereas a state and local race, their margins are very small, and the impact of disinformation or ads can really swing an election in a targeted fashion. So I guess I don't want to necessarily take up all the time here. I think the video kind of spoke for itself here. I'll be happy to answer any questions and tell you about how our enforcement has been going or where we're trying to go in the future as well. So.
Thank you, Mr. Damarinus. Appreciate it. Do task force members have questions? I think Ms. Malpe, can you unmute?
I am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have two questions for you. One, I didn't catch those. So the platform has to keep a database of political digital ad information. Are they keeping copies of the digital ads, or is it just information about the date and?
Thank you for the question. So one of the things was we had two types of information. Yes, the platform itself has to keep a copy of the ad and a lot of the demographics of it as well. So they have to tell me who the targeted audience was, the date of the range that it was done, how many impressions it had. There was a lot more information that they have to have record keeping for it. And the reason is that, so if there was, say, an impact on voting rights or any sort of enforcement, or if it was, say, telling individuals something that was completely false or misinformation, we have the ability to go in there and pull those records for any sort of violations of the Voting Rights Act or any other enforcements against those campaigns. We did not put that in the public domain at this point here. That was a part of the legislative, I would say, compromise, which was, making sure that the public has enough information, but without necessarily, I would say, making campaigns give up too much of their strategy so that opponents then can look at and see what's going on. It's the gamemanship of it, but at least the all those records that you would want, they're still the platforms still have to maintain for me or as the regulator to go in to look at if need be.
Okay. So that's really helpful, and that's really interesting to have a balance between what is publicly available versus a record-keeping requirement to allow you, the regulator, to do your job. And I think you answered my second question, which had to do with the comment you made, which is I think part of the rationale being allowing more speech by different competitor campaigns. And I was just wondering what data would the campaign be able to get through, I guess, the publicly available database that would give them that ability to know what the other campaign is doing.
I guess at that point there, they would know that they're targeting this station or this area here, and they can then look at it and go whether or not they have to change their dynamics and see the other campaign going, oh, they're doing a $500 ad, a $700 ad, and so now all of a sudden they're like, oh, look at these, they're doing this on almost every other week here or something. We now have to either respond, try to go forward with it, or to find out what's going on in that field. It allows them at least some sort of idea of what their other opponents are doing before campaign finance reports are coming out, without giving away their campaign strategy. And when we were going through it, the political operatives were saying, that's enough. We can figure out what we need to do from there. So, and they were happy with it. So,
thank you.
I've got a follow on that. My questions are in the same vein. Hi, Jared. It's good to see you. So it sounds like they're basically getting what Google now provides in terms of geographic, gender, and is it age or something? What if I'm like a bad person and I want to run a really nasty ad starting a rumor about my opponent, but I want to target it to people based on some proprietary, information I have. So I just give the platform a list of 500 people to target in this city council, district or something. The opponent, it sounds like, would only see the amount that I spent and when I ran it. Is that right? Or is there more?
Right. Yes, right. But so your opponent would only see that part of it. But the platform would have to keep those 500 people so that if the opponent ever gets hold of it and makes a complaint to the agency, we then would have the ability to subpoena those records and say, you have all this information. Now you have to supply me with the gender, the 500, information there. And then we would also get a copy of the ad as well. And so at that point there, it becomes as if it was like I would say almost similar to like a direct mail piece, right? In a sense, you targeted 500 people in direct mail, right? Your opponent doesn't necessarily know what the ad actually said until they get a copy of it. So, but now they'll know that you've done some sort of activity prior to the campaign finance report's deadline, so that they can either respond and say, hey, they've done something in this platform, find it. And then they can find the ad and then go either respond back to it, or they can make a complaint to the state board and say, this is in violation of whatever rule or law at that point.
So I think what I'm hearing you say is that to the extent that we care about letting people, respond to attacks against them and,
right.
The kind of idea of counter speech, that's almost a remedy in Maryland. It's not something that's kind of automatic from the data that's available. Instead, you can kind of go to the Board of Elections, say this is a problem, and then you guys can kind of force them to disgorge the targets or something.
Right. I guess the thing would be, if it's in violation of just the blanket rules. I don't get involved in the content. If it's something, right. I mean, so it's just kind of like they fail to put, say, an authority line on it, or they fail to disclose this activity. Well, then we can go after it. One of the other things too about this in this paid political area here was that in 2016 we knew that foreign influences did paid ads, which was why we also made that it has to be in U.S. currency, because they were receiving it in other currencies, if you believe it or not. And if one of the ultimate penalties that we have, or enforcement provisions, is actually we can seek the removal of that ad from the platform, because if it's a foreign national that's out there, I could fine them $10 million. I'm never going to collect that money because it's virtually impossible. So while that, and if they keep paying it, there's no, I would say, now it's a little bit different because there's political pressure on those platforms to remove those ads. But when we first made this, there was no Facebook, Google. They didn't do any self-monitoring of it. So with the idea that we can go in there through a court order and say, no, we're going to pull this ad. You have to pull this ad. And I think at that point there, by having even those little sticks there, Google and Facebook started to see the writing of the walls, which is why now you start seeing them pulling ads and blocking activity a little bit more. So I think along the lines here, if California starts adopting it, this is where things are, I would say, starting the tipping point to create that national database or a national discussion as to regulating this space. Maryland, I hate to say it, but Facebook, Google, they don't necessarily care. My revenue dollars is very, very minimal. California, that adopts certain activities here would have a substantial impact on it. The other thing too, which was Washington State has a similar idea of this disclosure and also having the database reside with the platforms. But their law was in 1974, and they've just kind of interpreted it in a modern situation, whereas Maryland's was basically crafted after 16 and crafted in a way for the current environment.
Thanks.
Jared, I just want to follow up on that so I understand. So Professor Wood asked you, I think she used the word disgorge, and what I understood is you as the regulator could go to the platform and get the targeting information from the platform, but that targeting information is not contained in the platform's publicly available database. So my question is, you get access to it, but under no circumstances do you turn that over to the opponent that's trying to respond though, right?
Right, that's correct, right, yes. Yes, because then it becomes a part of my investigation at that point there. And then once I get all that information with an investigation, at the end of the investigation, does it turn into a public record? Possibly, but then that's Public Information Act laws and everything else. But yes, at no point do I turn over that information to it. It's just helps with the enforcement. And by doing that, by making it known to the entities that they have to make sure that they have certain bookkeeping requirements, so that if by laying it all out there. Now, normally this is not something that they already have this information. We just wanted to make sure that they were aware of what information we're definitely going to seek about these ads.
Right. So now you had mentioned Facebook and Google a minute ago. We had a presentation, I think last month, from Facebook and Google, and one thing that stood out to me is they both have their database, but they run them slightly differently. There's not consistency across their databases. And so in your state, where you have different platforms that are now required to maintain these databases, in your experience, are you noticing problems of there's not consistency in functionality in all of these databases or access to the same types of information? Like, what's your experience been as a regulator with that?
Yes, it has been a slugfest to make sure of that, and I think this is where the states have to come in. There's I would say the federal void here because of the inaction at that level to help create the database. So it's up to the states to kind of create almost like a blanket type of uniformity just based upon sheer numbers. And this is why, I created the law, and basically, like Google's, we're just not going to comply with it. They pulled out with it. This is also going back to the Venable presentation here. These are all well and good intentions by the business out there. They're trying to self-regulate themselves, but this is not a field that we should allow self-regulation. These are constitutional rights that are being affected here. The right to vote is a very sacred right, and so we as regulators need to step into the field here and create at least a floor of the minimum that is going on there to make sure that the voters understand what is happening. Because the one thing about self-regulated industries here, or policies that Facebook, Google, or any of the paid digital ad people want to do, is that they can change it overnight without necessarily public input. They put it in there, and as soon as they start seeing if the pressure is gone, or they can make more money by asking less questions or anything like that, they can do that. Whereas with laws and regulations, we kind of hold their feet to the fire there, and making sure that there is a base level. I think one of the things was, when we made this, we didn't ask for a lot because we wanted to just kind of create a base just to see what the what the temperature was. And we saw that the temperature was not too happy with the idea of the law immediately. But I think that's the key here, and I always welcome other states to come on board and help push the ball forward.
Yeah, thanks for that. One other question for you. This goes back to the iconography and the political ads. In the video, we could see that Maryland does use, it looks like in some of the political ads, the icon, the political ad icon.
Right.
And so my question for you is, what's been your experience as a regulator with that? Are people actually clicking on it and making use of the information that's available from that link? Can you shed any light on that?
So I never really took any information about how much the click-through rate was. One of the things was we wanted to make sure that campaigns had the ability to use smaller ads to get in there. I think that when we first were debating all this, campaigns were basically coming to us and saying, we can't use these banner ads. We can't use these small little digital ads that are on my phone here because we can't display the disclaimers correctly, or it's going to chew up too much of the space. And we were trying to come up with a technological solution for them. So that's why when DAA came up with like this idea of an icon and everything else, and I was like, okay, as long as that information is there and in close proximity to the ad, then we're happy. Initially, we actually, before they had the little icon, was basically saying if you had like a little banner ad that was too small to include the authority line. And by the way, that was the other thing too, is that it has to be too small to include the authority line on it. So it's got to be like a banner ad, a little tiny photo ad. This is not ads that, if it shows up on your computer screen here, that you have to only get the little icon there. It has to be for, if you can put the information in a visible fashion to the voter, you have to embed it in your ad. It's the ones that you can't, that are too small because of the platform or anything else. That's when we are starting to allow these scroll overs or pop-up windows, because it's there-ish. We're trying to, and allow them to use it.
Great, thank you. Do other task force members have questions for Jared? Jennifer?
Yeah, I do. So you talked about your emphasis on the start of the tunnel with the campaign buying the ad, and we've heard from different speakers about struggles at defining that end. So, whether it's an influencer or promoted content, political merchandise. And one of the things I'm particularly interested in is, from the beginning, we've said one of the benefits of digital political ads is that smaller folks can get out their message cheaply, and that it helps inform voters, right? They hear about campaigns and issues and things like that. So do you have any thoughts about the complications of defining that campaign? And in particular, have you seen any smaller grassroots campaigns, political nonprofits, or even businesses that are unable to comply or confused with compliance? I just want to hear a little bit about that beginning of the tunnel a little bit more, with an emphasis on those smaller groups.
So the beginning of the tunnel, I push that beginning really to the political entities themselves. Those are the ones that are being registered with the state. Those are the ones that are the campaign accounts. The candidates, the PACs, the super PACs, the IEs, electioneering communications, outside groups. They know who they are. They've been they're normally regulated at that point there. Once they start to get into this tunnel here and start moving over here, and I know what you're saying about the influencers and everything else. Yes, I'm looking at it, and at one point it becomes, where are you in relationship to that first starting point? And I think if you're getting paid by the campaign directly, you're an agent of the campaign, and those same rules start to apply. It would be as if I paid you $50 to then start tweeting on my behalf. You're my agent, and you have to now abide by the same rules that I have to abide by, because whatever speech you're doing is paid speech through me. That's where the kind of the process is. And at the end of the tunnel here is the voter. So, we have the businesses, and yes, there was a whole bunch when we first started this law here, a whole bunch of the medium businesses were like, what do we have to do or anything? You're going to put us out of business. And I was like, that's not our intent. Our intent is if you're a conduit for that message, you just have to make sure you maintain records. And at one point here, I kind of just thought about this simplistically as a direct mail piece. The campaigns know who they are. They hire a person to design that campaign ad on the direct mail piece there. That's their agent. That's their directly person that is speaking for them. Then they go to basically a print shop and they go print this. The print shop is just paid, just has to go through it all, doesn't have any input into the ad whatsoever. And then the print shop is the one that then hits it to the voters. So along the lines there, the first person is more of an agent of the campaign. The print shop is just a vehicle that has to maintain the records, and then the voters get the information. So that's how I still view this tunnel here, but digitally. The campaign still, we know who they are, and then they know who they've directly contracted with in order to get this digital message out. And then the chunk of the tunnel with all the handshakes there, those are just basically conduits that just have to make sure that a record that has been flagged for them, that they maintain records of that. And then the voter at the end.
I mean, can I just do a comment here? I think the thing we're going to come down to on this targeting stuff is whether we think that online ads are more akin to flyers and mailers, or they're more akin to, broadcast television type advertising, because one has targeting information, kind of implicitly revealed, and one you just kind of can't get it. And so, Jared, it sounds like they kind of went the mailer analogy, and we just have to, when we start talking about this stuff, that'll be a big aspect of what we'll be grappling with, I think.
Yes, I think that's it basically, and it helped conceptualize it for everyone as well. I'm not a tech person, so when I got into this here, the first parts about this and understanding all these the handshakes that were going on to actually get to the voters, it was quite amazing to see the environment that it goes on for something that pops up on my phone and how fast it is. But the more I got into that, it was harder to figure out. So it was easier to start pulling back and kind of looking at some of the key chokehold points here, where things are along this tunnel. And it made it easier for everyone to understand, and there's natural breaks to the process. But yes, I agree with the professor here.
Great. All right. Any further questions for Jared? I know we have one more presentation and we're starting to head towards noon here. So hearing and seeing none. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me for this. So
take care. All right. And last but not least, we have item 5, trends and emerging issues regarding digital political speech and advertising from the 2020 election cycle. And we have Jay Wyringa, our communications director, and Erica Boyd, our senior commission counsel. Welcome.
Well, good morning, Chair and task force members. We are, as the Chair mentioned, providing a brief report on some of the issues raised and seen in the 2020 election cycle. I'm Jay Wyringa, Director of Communications, and I'm joined by our senior counsel from the legal division, Erica M. Boyd. Now, we asked our enforcement division and our legal division, especially the education unit within our legal division, as to what types of cases, complaints, and issues that were raised this year that were different or new or totally unseen as to previous years. So this brief report captures those responses. And again, as a disclaimer, some of these issues may still be subject to some enforcement actions in this agency. So this presentation is simply to provide the information obtained from legal and enforcement on the issues they saw as per asked by this digital task force. And Rieko, can you put up the presentation? I'm sorry, I don't have it right here handy. If you can put that up. Okay. Now, do I have control of that?
Hang on a second, Jay.
Okay.
All right, Jay, you should be able to do it now.
All right. So, as mentioned, these are some of the things we saw here at our agency, which are relevant to what you are tasked with doing. Obviously, every time there's something new, both enforcement and the media office received inquiries regarding the legality of video projections. Now, that necessarily is a new technology, but this was first for this office and the first for our enforcement division. Someone asked about, is this legal? And obviously this is a candidate. You can see his name, the race. The twist here was, and I think why the media was involved, was because he was projecting this onto a business owned by his opponent's wife. So there's disclosure here, but the point is there's always something new that we all see, correct? I'll begin with the basic one that we had was, it's not mind-boggling, but it was the most commonly seen in our agency, both enforcement and legal division, report a lack of understanding by candidates and the public at large of what's required on a Facebook page, especially personal pages of, especially those who are running, and a lot of elected officials have their own personal page as well as a professional page. Specifically from our enforcement division, candidates, we're told, continue to miss the requirement that they include a disclaimer on their cover or header photo. So that was the most common thing, were questions about what's required on Facebook. Now we get to the biggest new issue that we've seen both in enforcement, questions to the education unit, and here to my media office regarding in-app advertising. Specifically, as we saw here in California, Prop 22 was exactly all about the gig economy and its future regulation and statutorily how it's considered. So this caused the most attention. The media was all over this. I just put, I could have put 1,000 stories up here, but this one was from the CBS affiliate in San Francisco, KPIX TV, quoting a UC Berkeley election law professor and mentioning our agency in particular and the legislature and the questioning whether the regulatory and statutory requirements have kept up with something like this. And obviously that raised a lot of questions. Generally speaking, the issue was not over the proper disclosure, but generally it was how proper this is, how proper it should be or shouldn't be. In a lot of these cases, Lyft or Uber, you have that app, so you know you're in that company's domain from the beginning. Questions were raised to the legal enforcement and my media office regarding the options that were initially given to users, both the people looking for rides and the drivers themselves, as to, do I have to do this to pick up a rider or to get a ride? The media, obviously, that became a story as well. In this, going back to the KPIX story, people were concerned about both the ethical and the legal issues involved. Many people feeling they were caught in the middle. As I said, there's a quote from a driver here wondering if he could even work if he didn't opt in to the ad. Would he be able to pick up drivers? In response to all the attention, most companies do obviously monitor social media, the media itself. The app companies did adjust and to, as you can see from this screen, allow to have some of the opt-out options in this case after attention, but obviously not as we're still talking about it through regulatory or statutory means. And the next big issue that we saw were the influencers. A lot of questions, especially getting to the legal division surrounding the realm of paid bloggers and especially media influencers. We remember this first came to attention by and large last year when Mike Bloomberg hired hundreds and hundreds of people to promote his candidacy. And not just any people, but someone like me who has one follower, which is me, but the so-called social influencers, people with vast followings on Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, and elsewhere. And we're here because some of those questions do remain. And finally, some of the other issues that came up that within our agency are the links or lack thereof between committee pages and the required disclosure and social media posts. So just the connectivity of all of that. And then that there were certain social media sites that we were informed that apparently didn't allow easily or easy access to the hyperlinks. Instagram was one given to me by our enforcement division that rely on other measures as well. And as you saw earlier from the comment letter that we received, this was not part of our presentation because it didn't come up into our legal or enforcement divisions as much, but the streaming services, as you saw in the letter, that is obviously something at more of a 30,000 foot level. But again, those are the issues that we saw here in our agency that emerged from this last election. And with that, we'll open it up to any other questions, and especially where Erica can help answer questions that go beyond my legal expertise and maybe my pay grade. So we'd be glad to answer any questions at this point.
Great, thanks, Jay. Do task force members have any questions for Jay or for Erica on their presentation? Well, I do. So the paid influencer one, let's go back to the Bloomberg example. Ms. Boyd, can you sort of just walk us through what's and try to do it in a way that everybody can understand, but it's like, where's the gap in the statute, in the regs, that doesn't allow us to reach and require disclaimer under those circumstances?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and this is an issue actually touched upon in December as well, something that had been brought up by one of our speakers and an area we have acknowledged. The issue being that the statute is clear that committees that are posting social media ads would need to have some type of disclaimer either on their landing page or on the actual posts that they're making. If it is on a medium that allows for interaction, it doesn't have to be put on each individual post. And so the gap then is where committees are paying an influencer or a blogger to write something on their own page, where it wouldn't make sense for that blogger to have something in their header photo or about profile saying paid for by Yes on 22, because their entire site isn't being paid for by that committee. And in the same regard, in the current way the statute is written, it doesn't need to be put on every post as well. And so we're coming up with this issue where if the committee is paying for it directly, they would need to have the disclaimer, but if it's being put through a third party, like a blogger and influencer, it's not clear exactly how they would disclose who is paying for that content. So that is one of the areas we had recognized as needing some more kind of, dialing down in terms of the statute or the regs to make sure that we're covering that, because I don't think anyone disputes the fact that that is a paid ad. If someone's, not blogging out of the goodness of their heart that they want to support or oppose that ballot measure, then it should have some type of disclosure as to them being paid for that activity.
Is that a statutory problem, or is that an issue that we could address regulatorily?
It's currently not covered under the statute. It's kind of an area we've seen as not being applicable, and this is part of the issue in the Disclose Act of it's incredibly specific in certain areas, and then other areas we haven't covered. So I think we're looking as to whether we could cover that in a regulatory change, but it might require statutory action.
All right, thank you.
Can I ask one question related to that? Thank you. How is there any way? I mean, I know there's lots of influencers out there, but how large is, what's the magnitude? Do you think of the issue in California, for example? How many influencers are out there, or how many posts do you think were paid? Is there any way of knowing? There probably is not, but I'm just curious.
Well, I'll start when Michael Bloomberg first started doing this, and this is based on just public information, media reports that were put out. That not only were there hundreds and hundreds of people that he was approaching or his campaign was approaching, but that there were potentially thousands, because there are micro audiences all over the place for various issues and interests. And his campaign was looking at people who like bicycles and country music, or just anything that specific. And there are influencers in all of those realms. So I don't have any specifics, but from media reports, it could have been into the thousands and tens of thousands if each time you're marketing down or ratcheting down into those specific target groups.
So to follow up on that, I hate to go down this rabbit hole, but I'm going to. Ms. Boyd, so when a campaign, under those circumstances, it's the influencer that's pushing out the content that's really political content. There's no disclaimer on it. But the campaign that's paying the influencer, wouldn't they have to disclose that payment on their campaign reports so that there is some record of the payment to the influencer?
Yes, if the campaign is paying someone and it meets the sub-vendor threshold for disclosure, which there's $500 during the reporting period, they would need to disclose who they're making that payment to. And I will say that we did advise on some kind of workarounds for some of these influencers in terms of if they were making an Instagram post, we would have them tag the committee if the committee had an Instagram page so that someone could actually click through to the campaign or candidate's website as well. So we did recognize there was an issue and are trying to deal with that, but you are also correct that they should, if they're meeting the sub-vendor threshold, they should be disclosing that on their campaign reports as well.
So then in response to Katie's question, I mean, it doesn't sound like we've done this yet, but there should be data in those campaign reports that if we mine that long enough, that we would come up with some quantitative figure of how many influencers there were during a particular election cycle and who was paying them, right?
We could do that. I think it also depend on how the campaigns were disclosing the description of the payment. So some people might be saying web ads, some people might be saying influencer. That, it all goes back to how you're kind of defining the activity. And I'm sure that every different campaign had a different way of defining it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Malpe?
Yeah, Erica, I have a question, and good to see you. So, I mean, is there a reason why and I confess I'm not on TikTok. I don't watch influencers, so there may be a practical reason why not. But I mean, is there a reason why you couldn't treat it like you send your canvassers out, you put the paid for by disclaimer at the end, like on, any sort of a call script or a canvas script? Is the reason you couldn't have the influencer at the end of whatever their messages just state the disclaimer?
I don't think there's a reason we couldn't. I think one of the challenges we're coming across is that the statute's written in such a way that it doesn't cover all these different platforms. So for instance, on TikTok, if they're doing an actual video, they could say at the end the disclaimer. If they're on Instagram, they either have to do the hashtag, there's no way to have a hyperlink, but they could put the paid for by in the first comment under the Instagram post. and all these other sites that I have no idea how they work either. So I think, this is one of the points made in the comment letter from the campaign center, is that there needs to be some sort of flexible, technology neutral way of ensuring that there's disclosure across these platforms. And we're just, we're still looking for the best way to accomplish that.
Thank you.
I have a comment on that really quickly, in that I did give a name to staff about someone from the Center for Civic Design who has expertise in writing legislation so that this can be regulated but still allows the flexibility. And so I hope that staff would be able to talk with her, or she could be a speaker for our group at some point. I just want to highlight that again.
Yes, we're definitely getting in contact with her. Thank you for that.
Great. Any further questions for Jay or Erica? Hearing and seeing none. All right. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Erica. Great presentation.
Thank you.
We have now reached the end of our agenda, and we're almost at noon. So any final thoughts from task force members before we adjourn? Hearing and seeing none, I will move to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Seconded.
Second. Ms. Linker, please call the roll.
Mr. Brokaw,
Aye.
Ms. Davis,
Aye.
Mr. Heller,
Aye.
Mr. Kauser,
Aye.
Ms. Maltby,
Aye.
Ms. Wagoner,
Aye.
Ms. Wood,
Aye.
and Chair Matich.
Aye.
The motion passes.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. See you guys next month.
Hey, Rich, how do we want to do this? Do you want me to log on to a different link or something?
That's funny. I was literally just asking Sasha.